We got it.
What?
We got it.
What? What is it?
A memorial service was held at the Mar Vista Inn today for Jasper Lamar Crabb. He passed away 2 weeks ago.
Well, is that unusual?
He passed away 2 weeks ago, and 1 week ago he bought the land. That's unusual.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my very good friend and co-host, Scott Keith. Before we begin, I'd like to preface this and say that we will be talking about some intense subject matter, and you probably know that going in if you know anything about this movie, but I feel like I should just say that just in case. And honestly, I was never intending to do a Roman Polanski film. I just always felt a certain way about him. And but I put it on this time. I said, let's just do one of his films. This will be the first and last Roman Polanski film on the show. I have Everyone has varying degrees of separating the art from the artist. And I don't judge anyone any different way, I like the Beatles, John Lennon was a piece of shit, So it's a case by case basis, and that's where it gets really weird and really murky, and some of it can't be all logical, and that's the weird part. But when I was a teenager, I just was put off when I researched Roman Polanski, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna watch any of this guy's films. I was just that put off by it. And it was that disgusting to me. And then I accidentally broke that curse in 2021 when Sumner, my old roommate and alum and friend of mine, Sumner, he was like, let's watch this movie. I heard this is a very esoteric, cool movie. Let's watch it. And it was called The Ninth Gate, starring Johnny Depp. And it was a complete piece of shit. Man, that movie fucking sucked. I didn't even realize it was a Roman Polanski film. I was like, what a waste of fucking time and effort all around from the viewer and the filmmaker. And it was just like, this movie sucks. And it was like the most dead brained, like basic view of like occultism and shit. Anyway, so I ended up breaking that streak. And then I was like, I don't know. I just felt like I should, before we begin, I'm going to list off some of the people that signed that petition
Yeah.
in 2009 because it's very interesting. I hadn't looked at it since I was younger, and now as a more um I guess more understanding of the industry and who people are, it's kind of shocking and kind of just perplexing because a lot of these names are people that I deeply respect, and so it just comes to just a weird conclusion in my brain I can't wrap around. But people that are of note, at least, on who signed that petition in 2009: Erica Abrams, Woody Allen, Gianni Amelio, Greta Ament, Wes Anderson, Darren Aronofsky, Monica Bellucci, Adrian Brody, Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, Alexandre Desplat, Peter Lucas Erickson, Alan Fisher, Bob Fisher, Michael Flynn, Terry Gilliam. Yes, Terry Gilliam. David Heyman, Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, Giles Jacob, Wong Kar-wai, can't believe that one, Jonathan Klein, Harmony Korine, Michael Mann, Tim Myers, Alexander Payne, Tilda Swinton, Penelope Cruz, Brett Ratner, Martin Scorsese, Harrison Ford, and David Lynch. Very perplexing.
It is odd. I think at least Natalie Portman has walked back her support because you can argue, like, I'm sure all of these people, now a lot of this I'm saying this because I don't want to believe that Harrison Ford is supporting, like, knowingly supporting a pedophile. Um
That's just the weird question of how much did people know when they signed it versus I don't know. And I
right.
can't, but
And
it's
it's
just like,
varying degrees. And I'm sure, like, you have some producer or somebody coming up to you who's like, hey, we need to sign this, we need to support this, and they're giving you very limited information. like you might sign it based off that. It's perplexing, by the way. Rest in power, David Lynch. I gotta say that, even though it's kind of weird bringing him up in this context.
Well, I left him last because he's just been on my mind this week since he passed, and it's just shocking to me that someone I revere so hard would sign something like that.
It's yeah. And if you've seen Adrian's films, like he's obviously a big inspiration for you.
Yeah.
One of your biggest, easily.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, he's inspiring to a lot of people if you don't take from his style directly. It has been heartwarming, and I know the algorithm's just serving up what because it knows I'm a film nerd, like it's giving me this, but it is heartwarming to see like how many different people people have reached out, and like how a lot of like even casual film goers and film fans have like expressed their admiration for him. I was listening to the radio the other day, and the DJ, is Lisa Loeb on XM radio on like whatever the 90s station is, but she was talking about it, like it's so it's something, but
I actually would like to pause there and at the end of this do a bonus tribute to David Lynch after this.
okay, let's
So,
do that. Stick around to the end.
yeah. And so I thought, I don't know, it really like I haven't seen Annie Hall because of Woody Allen. It just bothers the shit out of me. I still haven't seen Steven Spielberg's West Side Story because Ansel Elgort. Everyone has their different artists. If it doesn't, if you're able to separate it, fine. I totally get it. But I have to bring this up not only because I feel that it's right, but just because it genuinely affected my watch of this film that we're about to discuss. And I couldn't help it. I thought, well, I'm just gonna watch it anyway. But like, there was an aspect of watching this where it really felt like I was just watching it on a surface level because of just him himself. It kept bubbling up to my brain, and then when you get towards the end and you kind of see what this film is all about, it just makes it that much more sour to me. And it was a very good film, but I cannot. I was unable to separate the two, and it did hurt the way I first saw it. So I felt like I should say that before we dive into the actual film. And
Yeah, and that's fine. And I was able to, because I was the one who pushed for us to cover this, largely because I'm reading Sid Field's screenplay, uh, which is a screenwriting book, and he references Chinatown a lot. And it's been so long since I've never seen it beginning to end. I caught glimpses on TV as a teenager, and so it's one of those like I need to see. This is one of these movies I need to
yeah,
see.
it's
I just
always
I
one that you would see clips of in like documentaries and stuff that when talking about cinema and stuff as a kid, but I never got around to it, obviously. But
and I want to take a little ownership. I pushed for like, hey, let's talk about Chinatown. I forgot Roman Polanski directed it until the title card, and then I was like, oh well, I'm already in now. I already got the movie. Um, so
I was worried that
I was able to separate it enough because Robert Towne, this is his screenplay,
exactly.
truly. Um, but considering the subject matter at hand, it is
It's yeah.
deeply ironic that Polanski was someone who directed this. Um, and so, in light of that news, and in light of Los Angeles being on fire and oligarchs taking over the country, let's talk about how relevant Chinatown still is, and why it's one of the best screenplays ever written.
And I will say, movies are not just the director, they are a collaborative effort.
Sure.
And especially he didn't write the script, he's just the director and he is a major part of that vision, but there is a aspect of moving parts here. Jack Nicholson is a major part of that. And I'm fucking relieved when I read that Jack Nicholson was out of town when that event happened. Roman Polanski was, yeah. And so I was like, did I miss this shit about Jack Nicholson? No, he was out of town on a skiing trip. So thank God for
Yeah,
that.
I think Nicholson's just a good old curmudgeon. He's not a creep.
It's also weird, like people at home, I made a film called Christmas in Vegas, and at one point we are in that neighborhood of Sharon Tate's house. So I have driven by that area. So it was really, I had read about this when I was a teenager and reading up on it again now, like 15 years later. It was like, I don't know. It just really fucking got to me. But yes, let's move into the actual film. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're talking about Chinatown, 1974. If you're watching this, I'm guessing you've seen it. If not, we're going to talk about it in detail. As I just mentioned earlier, I do think it's weirdly timely. I mean, part of it, the reason we're covering this just is because I wanted to cover it, but also I think like a lot of things we're able to tie it into current events. There's been a lot of talk about water rights and droughts in Los Angeles now because of the fires going on. Which I was reading, there was, and I don't remember the name, among like the left in the internet, let's just say the left algorithm. A lot of people have been talking about this one specific family that owns a lot of the water in California because they make like that pomegranate juice and other products.
Oh, okay.
And then on the right, I've heard people blaming Gavin Newsom, of course. And then I was reading, it was an NBC article, and they were saying honestly that's overblown. It's really not the reason that they don't have enough water. The amount of water is actually not the issue. It's just like the fires are too big, which is kind of what I thought when I saw it. I'm like, dude, no amount of water, like when the blaze is this out of control, is gonna be like, unless you have a million fire trucks, which you don't. Like there's no way you can completely.
It was also a huge like revelation of people's common sense because so many people are like, well, we live right next to the ocean. Why don't we just put a bunch of water from the ocean on all over the houses? What's in that water? Salt?
Yeah, I don't know. You can't just salt the forest and stuff. And I'm not going to be an armchair expert because there's so many armchair experts. You know, I'm already an armchair critic. I don't need to be an armchair firefighter at the same time. But it is a crazy thing. But there is some real life history behind this, and I'm gonna just go through it real quick. There's other videos that might be able to break it down, the so-called water wars in California around this time. Actually, before the time, it's earlier in the 20th century. This movie's set in 37. But basically, even though the details are changed, I guess largely so people don't get sued, the idea of like rich guys manipulating things to steal water from farmers, that happened. That is without a doubt happened. It was not as conspiratorial as people think because rich white guys are in bed with, you know, judges and cops and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, they even talked to Teddy Roosevelt about it at one point when he was president. Basically, they built an aqueduct in the early 20th century, taking water from the Owens Valley, which is like 200 miles northwest, I think, of LA. Were able to bring it into their land that they had a large stake in the San Fernando Valley, which was annexed into LA. So all of that is accurate. And there were the so-called water wars, which is not, it wasn't actually a lot of conflict. There were some farmers who tried to blow up the aqueduct with TNT, but it didn't work. Nobody really got hurt. But all of that's real, basically. And this is a fictionalized version of it. I mean, even to the point like Mulray is based on William Mulholland. If that name sounds familiar, there's Mulholland Drive, the street and movie. He built the St. Francis Dam that failed in 1928. They built it in a year, which to me, a year to build a dam is not, that it doesn't seem like that much time. So it failed right away and 450 people died. And that's referenced, you know, in this movie. In the first scene we see with Hollis, I think the only scene we see him speaking at when he's at the city council meeting or whatever meeting it is, toward the beginning of the movie. According to one writer, is the largest single loss of life in California history. And just to add a little more historical context, Chinatown, which was slums at the time, just because that's where you put all your undesirables, in 1933 actually before this movie was set, it was largely demolished to make way for Union Station. Because there was drugs and opium dens and prostitution and all that. And then a lot of the rest of Chinatown was leveled from the late 1940s to early 50s to make way for the 101 freeway. So
Okay.
that is all that is a very crash course history. I mean, there's entire tomes, long ass books written on this that you can go check out at your local library. But so we're coming at it from this.
I did
And
read up. I had to read up a little bit on Chinatown, just to. There are a fair amount of LA movies that you really kind of have to know the history, some California history, to get the full, uh, essence of. Especially like there were so many people that watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's latest film, that just they didn't get them the way they connected with other Tarantino films. It's because a lot of people, surprisingly, a lot of people do not know much about Charles
Manson.
Manson and the Manson
The
murder.
first time I saw the movie, I did not until the end credits understand that it was a Manson thing. I felt like the biggest idiot. And I've read about him and stuff. I guess I forgot all the Sharon Tate stuff. I guess most of what I've read about him is, I guess mostly what I've seen is videos of him in prison talking and being crazy. Because one time a friend, and I remember in high school, a friend of mine sent me a video of Charles Manson, like in a courtroom. He's like, "This reminds me of you." I'm like, "This reminds
Jesus.
you of me?" Like, um, I still don't know what it was about. But no, there's definitely one of these things. Like Licorice Pizza is another one that's a very LA movie that like I feel like I have to read up more on the history of LA. Which is, I don't know.
I
Is
was
it
just
people being
surprised. Like even
self-centered?
my dad and stepmom at the time, I was like, they were going to see this movie, and I was like, "Oh, you know about Charles Manson?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Okay, well, he had this ranch and Sharon Tate, and she was married to Roman Polanski, and it was just like,
He's at the beginning of the first Death Grips album. All those
yeah. I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. It's interesting how like there's no hand holding in that movie at all. It's just like, it's a
No, there isn't.
slice of the culture of the
And
real.
I really like that movie. I think I
Yeah.
like it more than a lot of people, as far as ranking it in Tarantino's oeuvre.
Yeah,
Um,
I rewatched it in 2023 and it was a great rewatch. But anyway, I was just thinking about that because of Roman Polanski's character in that movie briefly. So
yeah. Well, this is a noir film. This is not a love letter to LA. This is a seedy underbelly of LA, not even dealing with showbiz by somebody who is one of the earlier examples of your Me Too seedy underbelly um, director. Right, I'm saying it's directed by Creed. We've come full circle with that. But it does come into that new Hollywood movement in the 70s. The 70s is really one of my favorite decades, not just in film, but in general, in music and everything. Because I think we had gotten rid of a lot of our post-war naivete because of Vietnam and because of Watergate, which was 72. This was in 74. So like, JFK assassination. There's a lot of loss of innocence going on. That and being able to celebrate or at least experience some of the gains from the sexual revolution and the civil rights movement, because this movie is like, it's definitely centered around white people, as most movies set in this time are, because they were the people having power and doing things. But like, even though there's not a lot of dialogue given to its Chinese and Mexican characters, like they're there, and there's a class and racial divide that's apparent in the movie that the movie like it comments on without commenting upon it, and it does really well with that, I think.
well, I was kind of watching it, not really sure how I felt about how it did that because like Jack Nicholson's character is very much he makes a lot of Chinese jokes and stuff like that. And obviously that's how the character is.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this movie's called Chinatown and it says, it has that famous line at the end, which I feel like has a lot of weight to it. And then all of the, immigrants, like I said, they have very brief lines, and it's usually kind of like broken English and stuff. I don't know. I felt like felt kind of weird. I couldn't grasp how exactly Roman felt about this kind of thing. I don't know.
I think that, and I was actually reading through a PDF to the script earlier. So I think Town's aware of it. I mean, there's some insensitive things. I view it as the character. I mean, who knows what Town is thinking? I'm not going to try to read his mind. I've never heard the guy speak. Um, but something like bad for the grass, Jack Nicholson's like, yeah, bad for the glass, things like that. But you do have this thing where, I mean, there are always all the fringes, and that's by design. Because there are certain scenes, like the first scene with Cross when they're eating that fish with the head on it, which has some sort of significance, I'm sure, that I'm trying to unravel, other than just like he's a pretentious rich guy. It's there's that guy there who's his butler or whatever, and the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, live and help actually sounds annoying. I don't want like a butler or maid to be like living with me all the time or like around my house 8 hours a day. I understand getting like a cleaning service or something.
Yeah. But that
hiring
specific
waiters
guy was like every single move, he was like really quick to try and do everything himself, and it did come off like, okay, relax, dude.
I even feel weird if I go to restaurants and they're too much like that, or even I don't go to nice
Hey,
restaurants.
if you're a waiter, if you're listening to this and you're a waiter, stop coming to my table every 3 minutes to ask how we're doing. You've got to learn a system. As someone who is a waiter and in the restaurant industry for a very long time, you have to learn that you will annoy people and they will not want to tip you as much if you keep checking in on them too often. Please stop doing this. It stresses me out, and I'm just trying to talk with people and enjoy my food. Thank you. Carry on.
Yeah, no, once after you bring the food, take a beat, take 5 minutes or whatever, come back, say, how is everything? Make sure it's all okay, and then just be aware.
Once it's okay, all you need to do is come back to fill up drinks.
Yeah, and then if somebody has something to say, they'll say it. That's how I feel. But remember that one time it was we went to that karaoke bar in LA, and it was that Korean karaoke bar, and like the server wouldn't even make eye contact with me while he was bringing me my Coca-Cola. I'm like, dude, this service is so good, it makes me feel racist. Like it makes me feel like
weird.
I'm doing a bad thing. I'm like, dude, I've just ordered a Coke. This ain't champagne. You can just hand me a can of Coke, man. I'm just thirsty. Like I need some caffeine while I'm trying to belt out.
That was a cool ass place though. But
that was nice. I had fun at karaoke. So anyway, this is kind of the new Hollywood thing, but it does a good job of merging new and old Hollywood. And I think that's one reason it's so beloved, especially by people in Hollywood. You see a lot of people list this as their favorite films, a lot of screenwriters. A lot of this is one of the best films, one of the best screenplays, which it's, dripping with subtext in every line on a rewatch. Because I watched it a couple times for this. So I do think it's one of those things where like you have sort of a subversion of these noir tropes, but it's presented in a much more cinematic way. I think just in the evolution of cinematic language, and probably even, although I'm just guessing, something to do with, just having smaller cameras, more nimble cameras. You're able to do more handheld cameras. You're able to, move around more and make things better. Because if you compare this to something like The Maltese Falcon, which is a good movie, but there are stretches of that movie, and it's been years and years since I've seen it, years ago in a theater. There are stretches in that movie where it's almost a radio play, or a stage play, the way they're sitting around and talking and expository dialogue. And this movie does have a lot, very well done expository dialogue that's able to maintain the tension within a scene, or the kind of back and forth between characters with competing objectives. But at the same time, it is able to do a lot of its storytelling, visually. And it's also subversive in the way that like it's not noir in the sense that it's dark. That literally means dark in French, I think. I don't know. If you've taken a film class ever, or even browse Wikipedia, it's all taken from German expressionism and everything having dark shadows. But I think that's part of the irony of LA, and this is not the only movie to do it by any stretch of the imagination, is that like, yeah, it is this bright and sunny climate, but it's also this dirty underbelly. And also it's, if you go today, it's kind of a shithole. Whenever I go to LA now, I'm like, dude, this place is such a weird freaking town. And now now it's covered in ash. Which is another layer. It makes me think of, I said this to you in private off camera, but it makes me think of, there's an episode of King of the Hill where Peggy goes to Tucson. It's 110 degrees out. And she's like, this city should not exist. It is a monument to man's arrogance. And between the wildfires and the earthquakes, I can't help but think that about that line with LA. I'm not, which is no disrespect to anybody living there. It's a weird town. And we all
It
know
is,
that.
especially like many people are just waiting for what they call the big one, the one giant earthquake that's going to take everything out. It's like,
Yeah, and you have to like consume and consume before the big one comes because you're living on the precipice of destruction at all time, either natural or economic, because your career goes down. It's such a weird town with a weird vibe. You know, if I go to Chicago or New York or something, I mean, New York's crazy now too, but if I go to Chicago, I'm like, yeah, it's cold, but I don't feel like we're gonna die all the time. Well, I don't know, it depends on what neighborhood you're in, but that's a whole nother issue. LA has that issue. Every big city has that issue.
yeah. The first of all, I will say on a smaller level, that wouldn't be that bad of a gig. I wouldn't mind catching cheaters for a living. And
Yeah, I bet it gets. I've heard it gets boring. It's a lot of sitting around.
not on that,
But
yeah, but I can fucking sit on my ass for a living,
it's. I mean, yeah, it's better. It's better than doing roofing or something.
Parker and I, she showed me this TikToker who like records like vlogs of her doing this job, going on stakeouts and like catching men cheating on their wives and stuff. And obviously, that's a much smaller scale. She's not dealing with powerful people. And you could still risk getting into trouble, but like, for the price she's making, it's not a bad gig, I don't think. But I appreciate that as like a premise. I like that. And also I like that it wasn't just like I thought going in it might just be a basic like detective movie. Someone's died, now I have to figure it out. Oh, I was a private eye and then or I got kicked out of the police for, different stuff. And it does
Yeah,
have
the
those themes,
tropes.
but it does it in such a fresh way that even 50 years ago, it still feels fresh. I was impressed with that.
Yeah, this movie's 50, almost 51 years old. It's crazy. Um, no, it does do that, and it's a weird thing too, because like private eyes and noir and detective fiction, it's so common. I'm like, dude, I've never met a private eye in my life. I've met plenty of cops, just about. I've met people who are cops or COs or whatever, just around, not even on duty. But it's like, I guess private eyes are still a thing. I don't know if they still work.
They
They
are.
are still. They are still a thing.
You and I are
Um,
just not involved in anything or with anyone
yeah, we're
crazy.
we're not doing tax evasion or cheating on people or anything like that.
No,
Um,
none of my friends or family are into anything shady, so I've never met a private eye.
yeah, so says you. Um, that was cool. How the heck do you get into that business even? Like, there's no degree you need, can't you? You and I could just open up the Harbor Private Eye
Oh, great, yeah.
Detective
That'll
Service.
be the next buddy comedy that we make.
Yeah,
It'll
dude,
be
that'll be our
awesome.
buddy comedy. Two film nerds on YouTube open up uh, Private Eye and immediately gets our asses suit because we don't know what we're doing.
Immediately killed by the corporate elite.
Yeah, dude, we get killed by the Alamo Draft House people because we uncover a conspiracy or something about their nuggets not being good or something. Um, so yeah, so this movie starts out. I mean, let's talk about Giddies as a character, Jack Giddies, who's one of the great film characters and like a standout performance in a career of standout performances from Nicholson. Some people say it's his best. And it might be my favorite. I
It's
mean, I haven't
definitely
seen.
not.
Definitely not. What do you think is the
The
best?
Shining, my
The
boy.
Shining's. It's been too long since I've seen The Shining or Cuckoo's Nest, so I need to rewatch those. But
I could watch The Shining, the scene where he slowly chases his wife up the stairs. I could watch that every day and just kind of
yeah,
break it down.
yeah. Could you do 100 takes of it and watch it over and over again?
Yeah, if that's what it takes.
um, so you definitely have this stereotype of like a rugged idealist of a man, and it's explained later in the movie. Because at first you're wondering why is it called Chinatown? Because we don't really even go to Chinatown until the last scene of the movie, which is
Yeah.
one of the greatest scenes of any movie ever.
It
One of the
really
greatest.
pulled the movie together for me. It was
Yeah,
like that badass of an ending. I'm like, oh shit.
yeah, ballsy is the word. But it's because like Chinatown, as I said earlier, at the time was like such a basically a den of depravity, and there was so much corruption that he was sick of it. And again, I was talking about subtext earlier. Faye Dunaway, Evelyn, is asking him like, what's your beef with Chinatown? Basically, that's not how she says it, but he's like, there was a girl I was supposed to save, and I ended up doing the opposite. And he doesn't elaborate on that because there's definitely like an iceberg thing in the script where there's so many things under the surface. But that's another example of like that's exactly what's going to happen by the end of the movie. Or you're going to try to save these girls, this girl and this mother, and like you're just going to make everything worse. Like arguably, you made everything worse by getting involved in the first place, even though you didn't do anything wrong. You were trying to do the right thing. But I mean, we see it at the very beginning when Curly, who's played by the guy who plays Paulie in Rocky, who's typecast, like he's typecast as a wife beater in every movie. I gotta
The
feel
wife
bad.
beater, like kind of dumb working class dude.
Yeah, drunk. Like it's he's like drinking in the office. You can tell Nicholson's doing well for himself because he has like 8 different bottles of liquor just behind his desk. But he's talking about all these things like I can't pay you everything right now. I'll get the more later. And he's actually talking about there's an early mention of albacore tuna, which is set up later as just sort of a thread, almost to make you just pay attention to the word. I feel like even though this man has no connection to the albacore club or whatever, because he's working class guy who still is able to afford a pretty nice house because it's the 30s, it seems like.
Yeah.
But
when he offers him $75 at the end to take them, I looked that up, and apparently, adjusted for inflation, that's like $1,500 buying
Jesus
power.
Christ, dude. How much is 10 million? I mean, we can look that up, but Jack or Jake, sorry,
Jake, not
ask Cross at the end of the movie. How much are you worth? More than 10 million? And he's like, oh, certainly. He's almost offended that he would.
Yeah, he is.
And definitely. I'm like, so this guy's like practically a billionaire. I'm not going to do the math right now, but that's a lot of money today. And I do want to talk about something. Noah, I just put this together a little while ago. The name Noah Cross itself is a subversion in the way that this is a subversion of a lot of what you expect from a noir film, and is able to do things that like movies from those kind of Hays Code era or a more repressed era weren't able to do, or maybe hint at. His name's Noah Cross. Okay, Noah in the Bible sheltered everybody from the flood. This guy's doing an opposite. He's basically killing people, or at least their livelihood, by taking their water away. It's an inversion because he portrays himself as this upstanding, pillar of the community. I mean, even his name Cross is biblical. But instead of saving people for the future by saving them from a flood, he's taking their water and taking away people's future because he just wants power, and that's all this is. Which is very bluntly doubled down as a metaphor considering his relationship with young women through this whole movie. But we even have, what I'm saying though, even in the earliest scene, you have Jake being like, hey, I don't want your last dime. What kind of man do you think I am? I think he genuinely has sympathy for this, which I think is interesting because he gets on to cheating women. He's willing to do that for Curly. But when the fake Mrs. Mulray comes in, he almost tries to talk her out of it about her husband, which is an interesting double standard, and also tells you about some of the complexity of him, and we don't ever get that. Why? It's one of those things. I wonder how much backstory Robert Towne wrote for these characters, but it's an interesting thing.
I like the detail that he is like, he really tries to defend his line of work when he's in that barber shop and he's like, I'm just making an honest living. What do you do? He said, and the other guy's like, well, I make an honest living at the bank. And I love that detail. Like Jake immediately, he's just like, well, how many families did you foreclose on this week? And the guy has the gall to say, well, I don't publish that in the paper. It's like, which one do you really think is worse? Catching someone cheating? But it's funny that everyone like seems to have an issue that it's published and put on display in the paper. It's such an older world kind of thing.
Because
Like,
it is
oh,
scandalous, it is tabloid, but also I think that's an early hint that the whole thing was a smear job from the beginning. Because um, I in my head, Cross has connections in the media, including that specific paper, because he's like that being front page news. Even when I first watched it, I'm like, why the heck would this be on the front page? Like, do you know the water commissioner of our town, or like
yeah,
who
no.
water department, water and power? No, I don't. The only reason Jake knows is because he was in the police force, so he knows all these city workers. But um, so the idea of, I mean, first of all, affairs are just not news like that anymore. Even for like politicians, maybe I don't know, but it's also just because it's from a different era where there were multiple newspapers in any major city, not just one or two. Um, and like newspapers have always had their biases and have always had their patrons. Like that's it's this myth of like impartial journalism from like the Cronkite days. I mean, it was certainly more impartial than it is now. But if you go even farther back than that, like there was stuff that was straight up balanced. I mean, I just watched Citizen Kane, which you probably have if you're watching this, but go watch that. Um, so I mean, and then I'm just gonna go scene by scene
Sure.
mostly. Um, so he goes to that city council or whatever it is meeting, where everybody's protesting. He's kind of half interested. He's reading like they even have a newspaper just for like horse racing, and he's reading about Seabiscuit, which is a nice just little period piece detail. Um, and Hollis first makes his mention of I won't make the same mistake twice because he's an engineer being like, hey, if we do this, it'll mess up the climate. And, people don't like it when scientists and engineers try to warn you about how things will mess up the climate. And so they ignore it for their own financial gain. I'm not being subtle with my commentary there. That's fine. I do love that Jack just smiles when the sheep comes in because that's his personality. Like he gets a kick out of it. There's so many things like all these sheep come in, the farmer who has like an old like shepherd's crook. I was like, did farmers in the 30s use crooks like they do in like stained glass windows in the church?
Yeah, I think there's this, that's such a good way to show how everything, even though it's now one of the biggest cities in the world, even back then, everything was still settling from the old world to the new world. And you still have that divide of old school farmers and the old country mixed with this new infrastructure and how
yeah,
things work.
stuff that's more industrialized.
Yeah.
Because like there are not a ton of like small farmers anymore. Like the
Yeah.
whole McDonald thing. It's all these factory farms. The majority of our food comes from factory farms, that sort of thing. Which really devastates communities. It devastates communities around here. I was driving through one the other day, and I'm like, yeah, these people like essentially got bought out. Because we're in a agricultural part of the country. Which so we do that. The farmer accuses Mulray from stealing water from the valley. And even then, Gitz sends Walsh or the Giddies sends his photographer Walsh out there, and he's like, "Yeah, all I heard them mention was Apple Core. I kept Apple Core. That's another thing. Like it's this movie kind of shows me that like I don't know. With me and mysteries, I'm not a guy who's constantly trying to like outsmart the filmmaker or solve the mystery.
Yeah, no way.
I'm more interested in the process. And the fact that he's actually able to layer so many hints while because this movie is very dense with information on your first watch. At least it was for me. Um, like everything makes sense and like everything is in its place, and even there aren't even really red herrings. There are things that you don't think are important that later turn to be important, but everything's in its place. Even when he goes to the water department and he's in that office and the guy has the marlin on the wall and he has that albacore club like fish photo or drawing below it, like there's all these hints, just even in the set design that are telling you what's really going on. And it also lets you know how deep the conspiracy goes. I mean, everybody's in on it except Jake. Just crazy.
I do like that aspect because going in, I thought, well, this is the heart of this film is going to be bringing down the deep conspiracy of what's going on with this water company and the city of LA. And it's all about that, but it's not the center of it. And the heart of the film is actually just a very dark drama between a few family members. I found that to be really interesting and
Yeah, it's
unexpected.
there is, and somebody educated more in the classics could tell me, but it is almost like this Greek drama thing where like
Yeah.
there's incest, there's like family killing, there's like worrying about legacy and all these things. I mean, how definitely edible, that goes without saying. Um, but it does have that like grand, almost operatic feel while still maintaining in the trappings of a noir story, you know.
Retroactively, I can now see how influential this was on kind of like the postmodern version of Under the Silver Lake, that kind of thing. Because I
Yeah,
knew Mulholland Drive was influential on it, but it's like it's kind of Mulholland Drive and Chinatown in a way, just the way it feels in LA and trying to figure something out. I don't know. I like that. And
no.
you can see, man, Faye Dunaway. I like her more and more as the more films I see. I still think Network is the best performance I've seen her in. She's
She
great in
certainly
this.
gets to play it bigger in network.
Yeah.
They ham it up sometimes in a good way.
She's really good in this movie called 3 Days of the Condor. I don't know if you've seen that one,
I have not seen that.
but I can see why she was a star. I know that's
No, for
simplistic.
sure. She has the look. I mean, you think like old Hollywood movie star, and like you picture it in your head, and it's Faye Dunaway or something
Yeah.
like. She even has like she has those kind of like those high cheekbones and those hollow cheeks. And now a lot of actresses, in order to emulate that, are getting that buccal fat removal, which is
Yeah.
terrible for you. I heard a plastic surgeon talking about how he doesn't even do it anymore. Because
Especially
you have
because
to
a
like
lot of
get
them are doing it before they're fully developed, like done growing.
as stars or
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'm saying like
or
they're like
as
early 20s doing it. It's like your
yeah, it's
face
crazy.
hasn't even fully settled.
And some of them like already have like kind of hollowed out cheeks. Like they already have that look. It's just not as pronounced. Like Anya Taylor Joy and what's her name, Margot Robbie. Like
Yeah.
they've had it done. I'm like, I mean, I guess somebody, their agent or somebody, told them to have it done. It's got to be a hell of a lifestyle living in Hollywood. Jesus Christ! Look at like Ariana Grande's likely anorexia for Wicked. But it's a weird thing. But like what I'm saying is like she just has that naturally, and it's almost unfair. Like how just genetically gifted, like that's the difference between being a stage actor. Like you don't have to be as handsome, I guess, because you're at a distance and you have stage makeup. It still helps, of course, if you're a leading man or whatever. But like so much of casting is based on the face, which is why. By the way, I just want to say like he was already famous at this time, but like I feel like a lot of actors would balk at the idea of half the movie I'm gonna have a quarter of my face obscured with a bandage and gauze, because you have I don't know, you have this is not exactly the same, but you have like the guy who played Master Chief in the Halo show not wanting to wear the helmet so he can have his face out there. Or you have the Fast and Furious actors like we never want to lose a fight. It's in our contracts because we have to look tough
It's
all the time.
despicable that that's even allowed to be worked into these ideas and these scripts. Like
Mhm.
it should be story first, always.
Yeah, and Nicholson's like a real motherfucker. Like he gets it. He read a script, I'm sure, and was like, this is great, and like understand why it needs to do that.
The
And it's
first
such a
30
good,
minutes of Fury Road, Tom Hardy's face is obscured.
yeah, you know, what you read about that? Apparently, he was wild during the making of that, or he was a pain, weird guy. But I'm just saying, I think there are a lot of like lesser actors who would do it. But also, I think the true divas in Hollywood are not A-list a lot of the time. They're like A-list adjacent, you know, they're B-list. But they have a like they're resentful about things. Matthew Lillard was talking about that. He was talking about he lost out on stuff because like he thought he was a bigger star than he really was, and he kind of acted like diva-ish, you know. And he's been on record, and I think he's atoned for it and has, you know, done some great stuff. Twin Peaks, but um, we meet Mulva Hill, and this is where we get some of the first, because that's Mulva Hill is the guy he meets in the water and power department, and the head of the department is saying like, hey, we hired this guy basically as muscle. And I just love how much this tells about him and his relationship, like to his past, and also his relationship to law enforcement in general. He's like, how would you know your water shut off? You don't drink it, you don't bathe in it. They might have written you a letter, but that would mean you have to read. And then later he said, well, you know, with this guy, your water will be safe. When he was sheriff of Ventura County, the bootleggers didn't lose a drop. You know, he said stuff like that. It's so brutal. And it also adds to the scenes later where Mulville's kicking his ass because you can tell he wants to kick his ass right there, but he's not able to. And so when he gets a chance to later,
I do like that Jake can kick some fucking ass if he needs to.
no, you see him. You see him take on like when those farmers jump him, dude. Like he does some, like he was hanging out in Chinatown. He picked up some moves from James Hodges in this movie, dude. Like he's able to take on guys. That one guy's hitting him with a crutch. I don't even know why he's a crutch. He just has one. It doesn't look like he's using it. Do farmers carry crutches? I don't know.
I don't know why he needs it. I don't know. Maybe he's just stumbling around. Those fucking hillbillies. First of all, why did they have to shoot at him? You know, instead of just questioning him. He's just one guy. He's not. Of course, he's gonna drive off when you're shooting at the car. That's crazy behavior.
I don't know. Some people do it. It'll get done. I had a guy draw a gun on me because I was jogging across a sidewalk at night. I don't know.
Damn.
Yeah, dude. That was years ago. I don't know if I told you about that. But I was just like, hey, I'm not attacking you. I'm literally crossing the street. And he was like, oh, sorry, I'm a veteran. I'm like, that's irrelevant. I don't really
irrelevant.
It's like,
living in America.
no. It is relevant. PTSD, yeah. So, I mean, we have more hints. Like Evelyn says she wants to drop the lawsuit. Like she wants to drop the whole thing because now she's afraid of like her secrets getting exposed or there being additional heat on her daughter, you know. But
Yeah,
I think
because the woman pretending to be the wife comes in and it's a setup and he doesn't realize it's not the wife until, you know, so that's why he's so drawn in. And I like it's like totally so many points to this he could have just been like, I'm dropping out of this one, but
forget it.
That private eye gets to him, man. He's got to keep figuring out the
no, he's got to do that. And if you meet people, like if you meet journalists or people like that, like that's just how they are. They're nosy. They really are. Like it's like outside of the context of the film, a corny joke, but it works really well in the scene. It's like when he says, like, you know what you get for being nosy, and he slices. That's Roman Polanski, by the way, who slices his nose open. It's a cameo from him. But like you can tell that in every bit of characterization. Like this movie does such a good job of telling things through actions. He's immediately snooping through drawers in the water department, you know, at every chance. His taking like 7 business cards so he can lie. I didn't even realize what he was doing at first. The cleverness of like he opens his glove compartment and there's like 30 stopwatches in there, and you're like, why the hell does he have so many stopwatches?
That was clever.
Pocket watches, and it was like, oh, to see when he leaves that place because when it breaks down, you know. So I mean, there's so many different things. But
taking that He tries to borrow that book, and the guy's like, "Well, it's not a lending library."
Yeah, which is such a that's such a as a former librarian, that's such a like stereotyped way. Like it's always weird in movies when librarians are like assholes, because in real life they're like the nicest, most helpful people most of the time. But I think it was different in the 30s in a
Well,
municipal
also
life.
there wasn't a library.
Yeah, it was a you know, it was a records hall of records. It's a bit different. I was also, I understand it's more cinematic, but when he rips it out, and tries to hide it from that pimple faced nerd, uh, that, that just made him as pimply as possible. It's like, could you have not just like written down these names or something, or did you just need the evidence for yourself? It's just one of those little things. I know it makes it way more cinematic that he does that, and also shows like he doesn't give a shit. But
Yeah,
um,
he's pretty slick.
no, he's so slick.
But it's like an example of just that one character we're just talking about. He's only in that scene, but he feels well defined, even if he might be a little stereotypical. And you got to make sure when you're making a movie, if you want it to be a lasting film that people want to rewatch, you got to have every character feel distinct and be detailed like that, even if it's just for one scene.
No, and that's one thing I think about that with Tarantino a lot, who we were talking about earlier. Like, and like even his side characters who were only in one scene, like people talk about the Bear Jew, and like Eli Roth barely has any lines in that movie, but like that's one of the things people remember the most because he
Yeah.
made a character called the Bear Jew who walks.
Yeah.
um, but no, that I mean, because and that's one of those things that like it makes me, again, so much of film acting, especially, is based on look of just being able to embody a certain character type. Is like something like that. I think that actor who played the like record keeper, I think he did a great job. I think there were a lot of subtle things, the way he shuffled around, the physicality of how he shuffled around in his desk and like kind of slapped the ruler on the desk, everything
Yeah.
like that, the inflection, everything, the looks he gave them, like I think it's a great part. I legitimately think it's a great performance, and he has 45 seconds of screen time total,
Yeah.
probably. And it's kind of wild. How much talent there is out there, you know. Because I don't even get it. Like I don't even get how you cast for things sometimes. I mean, I guess that's why people get how much they know. And I don't know, anybody who's made it in any sort of entertainment, they admit that like luck is part of it. It has to be. It's or nepotism, or they're all nepo babies. There's also that. Or you're, I don't know. I guess you used to get on the casting couch. But anyway, um, I want to throw out another historical fact that I just googled as I'm going through my notes in the scene. So when he discovers Hollis's corpse in the reservoir, he meets Lou, who's his old colleague, and now he's a lieutenant. And he asked him, "Are you still putting Chinamen away for spitting in the laundry?" I had to look that up because I was like, "What is this? Is clearly referencing something, and it's not just like a weird joke about Chinese people spitting in their laundry." So apparently, this is the level of like cultural barrier and like lack of communication before cultures that was set up back then. In the 19th century, Chinese laundry workers, they had a device like a mouth held atomizer that they would hold in their mouth to spread starch evenly over it while they were ironing, you know?
Okay.
And it people who saw it thought they were spitting on the clothes, as part of it because they were so judgmental of these Chinese people. So they used it as a reason to like discriminate against these Chinese laundries, and why you would even arrest somebody over that. That's, I mean, shows like the corruption that Chinatown has. And he's like, "You're behind the times. They use steam irons now." Which is interesting. I also noted in the screenplay that like, and you can see it on screen in his face, like, despite him hating Lou, he's kind of impressed that he made it to lieutenant. He's a bit like, "Oh, well, shit, good for you, but you're still an asshole." It's one of those like, it's like when you learn your high school bully is making six figures, and you're kind of like, "Oh, wow, good for you, you piece of shit." There.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
What's up? So later, we he goes and talks to the kid on a horse, who I don't know what the connection is there, but that kid is riding bareback. And earlier in the movie, when they first meet at her house, um, Evelyn, excuse me. Evelyn is saying, she was like, I went riding this morning. He's like, looks like it was a long way. And she was like, it was bareback. So it's one of those things where like, I don't even know if it's directly connected, but it's just like the screenplay is like making you make almost subconscious associations between things, between certain scenes and characters. It's just subtly reinforcing the connection of the Mulrays to the dryness of that riverbed, and the kid being like, there's always a water in different part at night, talking about that. Stuff like that. But then after that scene, we get a call from Sessions, who was the fake Mulray we see in the first scene. And she's like, check the obituaries. And then after that, we get the first scene with Cross. That's when we meet Cross for the first time.
And that guy, it's obvious that this character is up to something with the way that he talks, but yet there's still this great nuance to his character and his acting and his performance. And I like the detail of when Jake is revealing that he knows stuff. He's faced towards the table and only looks back for like a second. He doesn't need to get a glimpse of what's his name? What's the guy's name?
Cross?
Yeah, Cross. He didn't have to like read his face because he already knows he's got him with what his information is. I like that kind of.
He says I have photos of. He's like, when's the last time you saw Hollis? He's like, I'm old, I don't remember. He's like, you saw him 5 days ago at the Pig and Whistle.
Yeah.
I have photos. And
it's like he didn't even have to read his face for information. It's like, yeah, what's up now, bitch?
Dude, Jake's such a badass. It's so good. Even though he doesn't even really look like it. Even the way he wears like cream colored suits, that's an inversion of film noir because he's wearing that instead of like a darkly colored suit. It's a nice suit because Lou looks at him. He's like, looks like you've been doing well for yourself. I was talking the other day about like living in this time period would be exhausting, and it must be why women had to stay at home because like the amount of suits and linen shirts and all these things you had to wear, like the amount of laundry and ironing you had to do sounds like it'd be a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah.
I don't even like wearing hats. They make my head itch. But then I'd be like, I don't know, a communist if I didn't wear a hat. I don't know.
My head's too massive and lumpy and misformed to fucking wear a hat.
Yeah,
so
dude, you have your brain's too filled up with stupid film trivia. It's all stupid out of your malformed skull.
Well, the thing about Cross.
Yeah, let's talk more about that scene.
I'm trying to figure out the whole time, just this brief conversation they're having. Okay, what is he leading him on with, and what can we get from what he's saying? Because I'm assuming at this point that he's at the heart of whatever is going on with this water situation, that there's going to be something. But I'm thinking, okay, well, he's probably just the next step to the big bad or the big connection. And I think it's a great way of leading the viewer on because he is at the center of it, but really that doesn't even matter because like that's not what this film's about, really.
No, the human stakes of this story are what it's about. It's a great misdirection.
Yeah.
Because I mean, normally you find the big bad before the end of the movie, and it's kind of like I can't do like police procedurals like Law and Order and stuff because there's always like in the second or third scene they interview a guy and they think they got him, and then they learn it's not really him, it's this other guy. Like it's follows a lot of the same beats.
Yeah.
And genre is a tool. You just have to know how to use it. And I mean, this does a great job because like it gives you the big bad right here. But unlike a lot of things where it tries to like surprise you with a twist, like it was him all along. It's like the audience can tell that this guy's in on it, and that because he tries to pay Jake. So it's so annoying having the actor named Jack and the character named Jake. I just have to get it out.
Also, his name's Jack in The Shining too. So
yeah, and it's Jack in The Shining. So I'm just like going in circles here. Like it does a good job of like this movie keeps leading the viewer exactly to where the movie is logically going, but the viewer isn't even necessarily aware of it at all times.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's so brilliant about
It's
it.
almost like you're fighting against it, even though it's like,
Yeah.
here, I'm taking you where you need to go. And you're like,
Yeah, it's like this is it. Like this is the rich bad guy. Like this is it. Why do you think he's paying him off? But like there's this undercurrent of like, and that's why the audience, you know, obviously in film noir, like the detective is kind of a surrogate for the audience going through the story. That's why it works so well. But like in this, like you feel the same frustration that Jake does because like he's just getting stonewalled at every turn, and occasionally he'll have a breakthrough. But like you almost get frustrated because you're just like, I know this guy's in on it, but like, damn it, I don't know exactly what to pin on him. And apparently it's a lot, you know. But also, like one of the things that this movie hints at with him, being a creep is he straight up asks, like, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?" Which is like such a creepy old man question
yeah.
that Jake is like taken aback by because he's like, not yet. But it's such a thing that on a rewatch, like it's gross the first time you watch it, but when you see it again, like it's dripping with subtext, of everything going through his character's head and just what kind of person he is.
And like the frustration at every turn is what really builds up the movie, I think. Because like he tries to go check out and he gets his nose cut up, and then he tries to go to that orange grove, gets the shit beat out of him. It's like, damn, dude.
He's an ass kick for this
But
whole
it
movie.
is very fascinating and interesting because like you just hear of all the corruption in the world, especially in LA now, and then you just hear about it from almost 100 years ago. It's the same old shit. Like,
It's
okay,
that's part of the thing about this movie is like I really took home like, dude, the more shit changes, the more it stays the same.
yeah,
Like I've already compared it to our like contemporary political climate and our liberal climate. But
they're
like
getting rid of all the farmers in the land so they can buy it up, the land for cheap. That's
yeah,
just like it's been
which
happening for ages, and now
and it's still like. By the
people
way,
are
I just
worried that that all of this burned down Palisades area is going to be bought up for cheap. Same old shit, and it's like,
oh, it almost certainly will be. And by the way, I was reading. I'll go ahead and cite my source from June of last year, a CNN article talking about this movie and about the water wars that it was kind of based on. It's like there's still stuff happening. He was sentenced in September. There's a guy, Dennis Falashi, the former general manager of the Pinoche Water District in the Central Valley. He was stole allegedly more than $25 million of water over a 20-year period. And under a plea deal, he pleaded guilty to filing a false tax return and conspiring to steal water, valued somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5 million. So they dropped the number. But like you have these people, him and others, who are like stealing water for years. They're just able to tap into it little by little and then sell it because like it's such a commodity in that part. I mean, this one guy who's like writing on it, he's like, people are stealing water all over the place, including celebrities. There have been celebrities that have caught shit for, if not stealing water, at least like breaking the drought district restrictions. In 2015's Tom Selleck settled with this one municipality because he was diverting water to his ranch during an ongoing drought, and then Sylvester Stallone and Kevin Hart and the Kardashians are all cited in here as like they've all been criticized for allegedly violating the local drought restrictions. So I mean, it's all the same thing. It's crazy. This is what Mad Max is about. That's why George Miller, he moved to Hollywood and he was like, oh, I got to make Fury Road, dude. And that's part of this movie, man. Like you basically have a richer Immortan Joe.
do not, my friends, become addicted to water.
That's this whole movie, dude. It even makes me think. I'm skipping ahead a bit more, but when Jake is like, "What more could you possibly want?" Which is what I think a lot about the ultra rich, people who have like $100+ million. I'm like, what do you what more can you buy? A bigger yacht? Um, and he's talking about it differently, but it reminds me of Dementis talking at the end of Furiosa when he's doing the "You and I are not so different" speech to Furiosa, and he's like, you need more and more until too much is never enough. That line from that movie, that whole speech and ending of that movie, so good. Why didn't you go see it? But like it really makes me think of that, and just like I've heard people talk about like why in Mad Max are these raiders like wasting gas going around when gas is such a commodity. I'm like, because that's the point. Because that's what people are doing now. People are driving trucks they don't need and then complaining about the gas prices. It's like, well, don't drive a truck if you live in the suburbs and don't need it. I don't know. Things like that. But so we meet Cross, and also we even get an early like hint of incestuousness and like into the psychology of Evelyn and the fact that she married her father's business associate who's older. He's about the same age, and that was more common back then. Maybe you married a guy who was 10-15 years older than you or whatever. I mean, or 20. This guy's like 20 years older. But like that already to me kind of screams daddy issues, even though in this movie, like Hollis is the most morally redeemable character. He's the only one who seems to be telling the truth the whole time. Excuse me.
I mean, yeah, the amount of time he was out there, like he must have seemed to really care about what was going on. So,
I mean, people are losing their livelihoods, and then how does that go? People can't get their orange juice. It's chaos.
I think it's a great but just disgusting reveal when you learn all these names are just all these old folks at this retirement home that have no idea about any of it. That really just like got under my skin because it's so like it just seems like it's something that could likely be the case.
Oh yeah, stuff
So
like that.
realistic.
Of course, dude.
And how much harder it would be to like connect the dots back then when you have to go to different offices and get different papers and just connect everything together. It's like,
yeah, it was a lot easier to get away with stuff.
yeah.
Although, I don't know. There's so much misinformation now. It's kind of easy now, I feel like, too. Or people just get away with it because nobody cares.
I know, but just like research is so much easier. Like, okay.
Yeah. No, you used to have to go. The card catalog was a literal card catalog.
Yeah.
You had to go get cards. You don't learn how to do that. No, when he's looking at these old people playing backgammon, and he's like, "You're looking at the owners of a 50,000-acre empire," and that sweet old lady doesn't even know any difference. He has to like pretend like he's an anti-Semite to get in. He's like, "Do you take people of the Jewish persuasion? Good, you don't." I was just checking. Because to me, that's another example of like the movie just straight up saying how all these like wasps are, in control of everything, which is still the same. It's all the same. Nothing changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he kicks that guy's ass. He kicks Mulville's ass, which is great.
Yeah, he just fucking goes for it.
All those old people are watching. That's the most entertaining. They didn't have TV back then, so that must be really entertaining, dude.
Yeah,
it must have been a lot harder to manage
he's gonna go in there with her and he's gonna find out some slick way to get out of it. No, before even going into there, he just cuts his losses and goes for it, like beats the shit out of him. It's like,
yeah, he's like,
yeah.
And also, yeah, he wants to. He's like, fuck this guy. I hate this guy. That's also it. He's also like, this guy's a piece of shit. I want to beat his ass, and get him back for cutting his nose, obviously. It's a crazy thing. But and then they start shooting at him, which is insane. Because that is one of the things that's another thing that makes you think how deep the corruption goes. Because there's some stuff like, first of all, some of the stuff Jake is doing, I think, is illegal. Like, you can't lie about your identity and like get into a reservoir that's a crime, But it's one of those things where, like, in a weird way, Jake is complicit in corruption because he's counting on like the nepotism and corruption and his connections with the police to like basically get him out of that. And even at the end of the movie, the last line I think Lou says to him is like, "I'm doing you a favor," when he uncuffs him, because he just wants to clean his hands of the whole thing and move past it. He's like, "I'm doing you a favor." Like, so even Jake, like he is a receives the benefits of the system that he's trying to uncover. You know, I don't know if he sees it that way.
I think he's the kind of guy in his head because of his connections and his past with the police. I think the whole time he's never expecting to actually get cuffed and booked for any crimes. He's actually thinking like, I'm always one or two steps ahead. This is not going to happen. And then when he finally does get cuffed at the end, it kind of feels kind of brutal for his character.
Yeah.
Like nothing. And now he's suddenly powerless in the worst possible moment.
Yeah, no, it is, and it is one that he does like by the end of the movie, and I think that's part of his arc. Like, comes to accept it because he's calling his buddies at the office, and he's like, "Hey, I'm about to be arrested. I just want to let you know. So meet me
Yeah.
here. If I'm not here in 2 hours, go here." He's
Yeah.
able to do that. So we come back from the old people. They get shot at. Why do you think they kiss? Do you think Jake has any sort of real attraction, or do you think he's being a honeypot and trying to seduce
I
her?
think at that moment, I don't think he has real attraction or care yet. Yeah, I do think unfortunately he was just trying to maybe get a little bit, do whatever it takes to figure things out.
Yeah, I think he was that into it. He was like, I'm willing to take advantage of this grieving widow. Just such a
Yeah, when
easy,
you say it like that, yeah, it's pretty fucked.
pretty brutal, dude. No, like Jake's like he's an idealist, but he's not a great guy. Like at his core, he cares about what's right, but like his willingness to do anything to get there is like that's a weird thing where like your willingness to do whatever you need to enforce your principles, like it's more principled, but at the same time, like, and not just in this movie, just in general, like it can like cause trouble, you know, like you end up stepping on people to like uphold your principles. um that's odd. No, because he does also like it's such a weird thing. Like I'm cleaning blood off the stitches, and then the next moment I'm like making out with them. Like it's such a like, is that erotic to you? Like, shit, I don't know. But it's also again, it's a genre trope. It's just one of those things. Like that this movie uses that trope, and then I don't know if it subverts it, but like it does it in an intelligent way that develops. Which even okay, I notice. What do you think the significance is, if any, of Jake noticing that she has a like a fleck, a black spot, a flaw on her iris?
I just assumed he was using anything he could to try and initiate that kind of flirtatious sequence.
I think it's like I'm she's I don't know if there's like a direct symbolism with like her like being partially blind or something like that. But like, first of all, I feel like it's a weird connection of like my nose is messed up, your eye is messed up, and I agree with you. He's trying to like draw that psychological connection so he can manipulate this grieving widow into sleeping with him, so he can continue on with the case. She even says at one point, because he says this is the scene where he talks about like he didn't like Chinatown. He tried to help this girl and ended up hurting her, which is very vague, but like the possibilities are endless of what you can imagine. Like, was it like an actual girl? Was it a woman? Was it somebody he was involved with? Was it not? Like, we don't get any of that, but that's what makes it good backstory. Is it's vague enough for you to project whatever you need to onto this. But Evelyn says "cherchez la femme" or something, which I looked it up. That's a French phrase often used in detective stories, which means look for the woman. So which it's basically like if you want to find out more about like what happened in this mystery, look for the woman involved, or like look for the love interest, you know. And this is the love interest. This is them giving you everything on a platter, but you not even realizing it. because if I had seen that movie in the 70s without Google, I would have no idea what that was. It's like they're telling you right there. It's like because it's the woman saying it, it's brilliant, it's such a layered, like honeycomb structure of a screenplay where like all these simple parts are like interlocking into this complex structure.
I think
But
she's naive to think that she could react the way she does after receiving that phone call and thinking like, oh, he's just gonna stay there. Like she begs him to stay there. And it's like you know him well enough now and know what he does. Like you really think he's just gonna stay there while you act this way? If maybe if she would have kept it subdued on the phone, she could have pulled it off. But obviously, it was distressing enough. But I
if
mean, come on.
if I was going to nitpick this film, there are a few plot beats that I think you could argue are a little bit contrived, and that's one of them. Although I do think it's like realistic to her character psychology. She's feeling vulnerable and she's having to comfort her daughter that the dad is dead, you know. So she's freaking out at the time, obviously. But there's the idea that later when they take him to Curly's house and he's like, hey, let me go in there alone for a bit. It's like
yeah, like come on, man.
That's that's probably the most contrived moment of the entire screenplay, I would say. Like it still works for me in the moment, but I did think
I think that moment he should have had he should have taken the time to have a more convincing argument to make me believe that. Just like a very specific thing he could have pulled out of his ass to make it really seem like, okay, I can see why this guy would go along with it this one time and no other time.
no, but like Lou, this guy. Like, why would you trust anything he says?
Yeah.
Especially when he's a suspect. Like, what are you doing? And this is a smaller one, but the idea that Noah Cross like dropped his glasses in there while drowning Hollis and didn't retrieve them. Not only that, none of the workers like retrieved it, and it seemed to be pretty deep in there. Like, and Jake, he's got that, PI vision, like he's able to like see the clue. It's like an old adventure game where like the items highlight where you like mouse over them. Like
Yeah.
he has that kind of eye where he's able to do that. And the idea that the gardener nobody else saw it, like that's not as big of a deal, or that Hollis all or not Hollis. Church is no Cross. God damn it. Cross is also like such a narcissist. He might think even if I leave my glasses there, like this won't be evidence. Like nobody will find out this isn't mine. Or just like it could have fallen out of his pocket and he not known. Because he's not always wearing them. Because later in the movie we see him get it out of his pocket and like put it on his eyes, so he doesn't use them all the time. So that's what it is. I just talked myself out of that.
That is a great setup though of like what seemed like an offhand remark of the Chinese guy saying, bad for glass. Because, certain things you might run into somebody in public and something they say is just interesting enough where you kind of remember it. But it's still just an offhand thing. And then for that to actually come into play at the end, I think was great. Because that is like, I don't know. It's not Jake just kind of playfully being racist or anything. It's like actually like, oh, okay, this is a setup.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that first line, the first time it happens, it's not just in there to show like, see, Jake's racist. Like that's not the point of the scene. But I do wonder like who raised, because it seems like this is almost a recent development. Like, why because the girl's what 14? She looks about like 14 or something like that. I don't know how old you think she is. It's like, is Noah just now looking for her, or like, I mean,
that wasn't clear to me.
That like, and because he like offers to pay her extra, but also, I mean, he's trying to. It seems like he already knows that Hollis is seeing her, so he's trying to smear Hollis. But at the same time, like, who's been raising this kid? Because Evelyn says when she was 15 and had the kid, who I assume is like colorblind and stuff, because in Britain, but when she has the kid, she flees to Mexico and she says Hollis takes care of me. I'm like, well, who's raising the kid? Was because she doesn't know, she doesn't act like at the end of the film like she knows Noah. So I don't know about that. That's not a plot hole. That's just something that the plot doesn't address, you know?
Yeah.
But it did want me to make me wonder more about like that situation, you know, how much did everybody know about what was going on? How did that child grow up? Clearly in an odd way. She was kept in the house like a, I don't know, like a genie in a bottle, and like not told about her own father's death, which is already an insane thing. Why would you keep that? I guess not to draw her into hysterics when they're already trying to like keep on the DL, you know?
And and it's also a good setup, like not I just didn't think this movie would be going in that direction at all. So when he spies on them and he's like, okay, you're keeping someone hostage, I'm gonna take you to the police. And then she breaks down and says it's her sister. It's like, oh, okay, well, so what? And then later when she breaks down further and says it's her daughter, it's like, well, which is it? It's both. That's such a brutal revelation. It's like, oh shit.
It's completely brutal, ballsy for the time, or for now even. Apparently Faye Dunaway, like the slaps weren't looking real enough, and Faye Dunaway was like, "You can just slap me, you can just beat me up, that's fine." She was like that. She's like, I can take it. But that's another example of like Jake not being a good guy, even though like he's the protagonist. I mean, he's really complex. I know, that was way more common in 37 of like, private eyes just slapping random broads. You know how it is. It's that weird thing where it's like they don't want to curse in front of women. He asks his secretary when he tells that dirty joke, that stupid Chinese sex joke, to like leave the room, but he has no compunctions about like slapping a woman around to get information. Even though
To be fair, he would beat the shit out of anybody if they're fucking leading him in the wrong way about
yeah,
things.
I mean, I guess you could argue that. Like, I hit men and women. It's equal.
Yeah.
I'm a feminist. I hit men and women. That
I
sort of
was
thing.
thinking about when he gets that call and he goes to that woman's apartment where he finds her body and they're like waiting in like the shower for him or whatever. And it's like he says he got a phone call and stuff. It was just making me think of like how now I could prove that, like pull up my phone and be like, here's whoever called me.
Yeah,
And like how many situations then it's like, well, how do we know you were actually called or who you
right.
called anybody and stuff? It's like, fuck.
Right. I doubt the phone company, like operators, kept a record of every call. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
they did for a certain time. Um, yeah, police work was. Whew, I don't know. It's like I don't know. Luigi would have gotten away with it if he had done it in 37. Like nobody would have caught him. Like I don't know. When did we even start dusting for fingerprints? There's a while where it's like we didn't even use fingerprints. I think it crazy thing. So here's another piece of trivia considering this movie. Um, One time after making this movie, they're interviewing him, um, Jack Nicholson. I mean, Time Magazine was, and they researchers informed him that his sister was actually his mother, which is kind of a similar revelation. So Jack Nicholson's sister was actually his mother.
Huh.
Wasn't aware of it. I don't know the details on that. I haven't read the article. It's like old, hard to find exact details. But that's something I had actually heard of before this movie. You know,
Well, do you know how much older she was than him?
no, I'm gonna
Okay.
go Jack Nicholson's sister mother. Um, yeah. Here's an article. Jack Nicholson grew up believing his mom was his sister. She got pregnant by her boyfriend Don, who's married to another woman at the time. Which apparently, okay, da 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 da. So Ethel, like the the girlfriend of his father basically raised him and acted as mother, and then acted like his 18-year-old mom. So she was 18 years older. They acted like that was his sister. And then Time Magazine researchers learned
Yeah.
that that's not the case. So, I mean, a bit different, but that's crazy,
Yeah.
that happen. Also, that's how you get a great actor. That you need a certain amount of like weird childhood trauma that they don't even know about. That's subliminal, and then they turn into Jack Nicholson, and then there's the Joker. You know,
I think I think this is a good movie, but it was when she reveals that it is her daughter and her sister because she was raped by her father when she was 15. That's when it was just like, I can't, my brain was just going haywire of like, how do I accept this movie when a couple years later, Polanski assaulted a 13-year-old child
it's a
multiple
weird
ways.
thing where you're like, was Polanski attracted to this script for the wrong reason? You
Yeah.
know, I don't know how this movie developed, but like, it is a thing where like, I mean, it makes it's interesting. I'm not going to pretend like it's not, but like it doesn't affect the movie too much for me. A lot of stuff does. I don't really watch Woody Allen stuff. I can't. I remember I saw Annie Hall this years ago, years and years before I heard about all the allegations and stuff, and I loved it. And then as an experiment, I watched it again later. I was like, yeah, I just have trouble watching Woody Allen like date this younger woman. And it's not even nearly as bad. I'll never watch Manhattan because he's literally like dating a high schooler in that one. I can't do that. Um, well, I don't know. It's this weird thing where like people were so open about it.
Well, it just and unfortunately it just I couldn't even help it, but it really deflated a lot of it for me. No, I'm not saying the movie's not great, but it unfortunately I had like not unfortunately, I just happened to reread up on all the stuff right before I watched it because that's just what I felt like doing. And the part that kept getting to me is that yeah, he did this and it's horrible, but it's the interview after he had ran away, a year after Polanski had escaped. And he said, if I had killed somebody, it wouldn't have had so much appeal to the press. But you see, I'm gonna try and be. We're gonna get demonetized, but whatever. And he says right after that, but effing, you see the young girls. Judges want to F young girls. Juries want to F young girls. Everyone wants to F young girls. And then just a few years later, he said that he just said it just straight up, like I like girls at that age, and because the girls of that age, for some reason, they like me, and it's just like no remorse and no like no, I don't know, it's just that brutal enough to where it's like why like how, you directed this script and then immediately did it just a few years later. So what are you really trying to say here with
I
this?
don't know. Are you trying to say that Cross is the hero? Like, what are you doing?
No, I don't. But I
Not a
don't think
bad.
he's trying to say that. But like,
No, I know he's not. I'm glad I didn't read that interview before I watched this movie.
it's it's one of the more brutal things that I was just like sick. So it was so hard to like focus on like the good aspects of this movie at points for me, and that's why
Right.
I wanted to preface that at the beginning of this
Oh
episode.
no, I absolutely get it, and I'm not a Roman Polanski supporter here
No,
by any
I
means.
know. I just it's just like
He's not getting
that doesn't detract by how brutal the ending is, but I will say that just like
no, and it's I mean one of the classic Hollywood endings, and ballsy, like, and that even makes it darker. It's like because at the end of the movie, you've seen it. Cross is trying to be like, I'm your grandfather. They're running away. Um,
she's
Evelyn
desperate
freaks
enough to
out.
not let him be in her life at all, and is so sickened by it that she's willing to pull out a gun and try and shoot him dead.
Yeah. putting her and her daughter's life at risk, knowing there's cops right
Like
there.
it's that she is disgusted and horrified by her trauma and what happened that much.
Mhm.
And I just find that fascinating that it's portrayed in such a raw way, in such a horrific way that totally demonizes this guy. And yet the
Because
director is such he's easily capable of doing evil
yeah,
things.
because the last thing we see of the movie, when he says like, I want to control the future, even though he already has all the money. He's just like, the future. I want to control the future. I want legacy. And like it's not at all subtle. Like the last thing we see him do is like take the screaming granddaughter, put his hand over her mouth to silence her and drag her away. It's
That's pretty
so
sick.
probably to end up raping her, I assume. Like that's what it
Now
feels like.
he already has control of everything else. This is the final piece. I think it was kind of that I can see why it was an obsession in a way to him. Like he loves this control he has. This is one thing that's been out of his reach that he didn't know about, and the fact that he does get it at the end is so sinister and vile. And I just didn't expect that. On its own, it would be so sinister, but with the meta commentary, it's I can't even wrap my head around
No,
it.
with the metacom, I really can't wrap my head around it either, or like how people rationalize. Because people rationalize, like, I was talking with a friend, she's reading this book about this, like, leading up to the Civil War. I think he was governor of some state, or politician. I don't remember the example. Apologies, but like, he was like one of the main proponents of slavery leading up to the Civil War when they were having the abolition talks. And like that guy like raped all three of his nieces that he pretty much raised as daughters. And in his journals, he was being like, they keep coming on to me. And then one of his journals, he's like, oh, turns out they don't like this. Like the amount of like, I don't know, just rationalization that people were able to do, which is always fascinating to me, how people are able to rationalize things, especially at that level. Like, it really blows my mind how anybody, like, because like people at Epstein's Island weren't being like, oh, I'm evil, I'm a villain, like there had to be some sort of rationalization. And the fact that the human mind's even capable of doing that, that's really the darkest part of this movie.
Yeah,
And that it's still relevant, which because it's timeless, despite being a period piece.
it's strange.
It is
It's also
strange.
strange. It's strange that like France was not willing to expedite him for years and years and years, ship his ass back. I don't know. It was only when he was like going to that film festival in Zurich that the US was like trying to set up a thing with them. And I don't know. It's just like then I think the judge like decided that like his time spent away was like enough or whatever because it had been
Yeah, but
decades.
he's eating pommes frites and steak and fruit. Like
Yeah,
it's not like he's away, in county jail waiting to go to prison. It's not that.
I looked at that list of names and 90% of them were all French. I was like, okay.
Oh, I think the French are weird about that. I don't know. See some freaking what's his name, Leon the Professional. I
It
bet that.
fucking bums me out too. Yeah, Luc Besson. It's like
Yeah.
I love The Fifth Element, but I've not watched it in 10 years. It's just something just eats away at my brain.
I have not seen Leon the Professional for that reason. And allegedly, the original screenplay it was going to be like
Even
her
creepier,
coming
yeah.
on, yeah, versus like a more of a father figure or something. I saw some of it when I was a kid, like my parents were watching it, but like now it's one of those I see it referenced and I see the meme of Gary Oldman screaming everyone, and I'm like, I can't watch this movie knowing the director and knowing what the movie is. It sucks. It sucks. Not as bad as Valerian sucks, but it still sucks.
Yeah, fuck. That's my own fault for just like up until Valerian, I had heard like rumors, but I hadn't actually done the research, and that's my own fault. And it's like, I don't know.
Oh yeah. Well, it's I don't know. Don't blame yourself. You can't keep
Hilarious.
track of every crime.
What a fucking
Missed opportunity.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh well.
huge one. All right. Well, forget it, Adrian. It's Chinatown.
Yeah, what do you make of that final line?
I think it's great. I think it's one of the. I think it is like depressing. I think it's um Jake finally accepting that like he can't change the system, which is an inverse of like not just noir, but like American storytelling. It's all these like we're a hyper individualistic culture, and all the stories are like one person is able to, change things, save the world, whatever, and this is the absolute opposite of that. Where like part of his arc is just accepting that the world is broken, which is a dark thing for like a dark period in American history. Um,
I think, although in retrospect, I think that's cool that a movie such as this could become such a renowned classic
mhm.
amongst filmgoers. I did not expect this level of a turn in the last 5 minutes, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
And it did elevate the film a lot for me in a fucked up way, but it is what it is. But just the way that quick image of Cross grabbing the girl is just like equally evil to me as the sequence of Laura Palmer's dad carrying, dragging her through the forest with Ronette Pulaski, and it's just the most evil shit. And I don't know. That's just what it reminded me of, and that to me, it's stuff like that that's just scarier than any other like actual horror to me. It's so effective in that way. So kudos, I guess, to an evil piece of shit portraying evil on screen. A man makes a movie about LA being ran by disgusting, corrupt, misogynistic, predatory men, and then a few years later becomes one. So,
yeah. Well, I'm
yep.
gonna I'm gonna direct a movie about a guy with pack abs who bangs a lot of hot women, so I can manifest that in my
There you
life.
go.
Okay, we had to leave it on some sort of levity. I have nothing more to say.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else watching, that was Chinatown. Crazy movie, heavy movie, but we made it through all right. Thanks for listening. If you want to support us, we have many avenues to do so. I have a book for sale if you want to check out a little book I wrote 2 years ago. That'll be in the description. Support us that way. We have plenty of episodes of here, just like this episode, but we also have video essays, similar kind of stuff. I have two new ones on the way. So if you were looking for more of those kinds of videos, you're in luck because I've got two on the way. You can follow Scott K Comedy, Instagram. You can follow me if you want at The Mooring Line, which is our secondary channel, which you can find our tie-in film, The Patrician's Guide to Kino, a fun little project I made during COVID as a tie-in to this show we do right here. Other than that, that's about it. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.